So Dragon Prince season 4, we just finished it a few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
We sure did.
bit disappointing. Bit disappointing when compared to the first 3 seasons that followed. So for the uninitiated, The Dragon Prince is an animated series on Netflix created by Wonderstorm, made by co-creators Aaron Ehas, who worked on Avatar: The Last Airbender, and Justin Richmond.
Yeah, I'd love to do a little more digging on these guys and fully understand their filmography and their credits, because it's frustrating to have watched this past season and compare it to the previous 3 seasons, and it almost feels like, did someone make these guys step on a rake or something? Did someone put a banana peel in front of them? What how on earth were these guys sabotaged so that the same team, these two main guys and all of the people who work with them, that this team who produced the first 3 seasons of
Yeah.
The Dragon Prince are also responsible for season 4?
So it's like obviously the pandemic happened, but it does distinctly feel like they had a specific method of operation for seasons 1 through 3, and then somehow with 4, it's like whatever hypothetical machine was spitting out the series has sludge in it now.
Yeah. So this phrase comes up a lot lately in the last couple of years, but there's a phrase for we refer to seasonal rot.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that word.
we love that word. We love it because it encapsulates what is a very what I think of as a modern problem. That, I mean, I don't know what TV shows were like 20 years ago because I wasn't really thinking that much 20 years ago, but today we have this concept surrounding shows that get too popular, too quick, and then, they should naturally probably wrap up at about 2 seasons or 3, and then, but the pressure from fan groups and, fan presence online says, no, no, please keep making it, we'll keep supporting it, and the producers are like, well, hot shit, this is still making money, let's keep this train going.
Let's keep this gravy train going.
Yeah, let's milk this cow as long as we can, it's still good. And it usually mostly applies to live action TV,
Yeah,
mostly.
Supernatural comes to mind.
There are lots and lots of shows that have had, their rise to popularity and then experienced some kind of rotting as the creators, the well of creativity begins to run dry, and the writers get desperate and they start, oh shit, oh, we gotta start making some twists happening in here. Let's start, making our characters do strange and stranger things. And anyway,
It's
it's interesting to see
yeah.
such a dramatic shift between seasons 1, 2, and 3 that seemed to have been so cohesive and so well designed to at least be a fully structurally sound story for between 3 seasons to this, to just, it's just such a huge shift into what I feel like is what we can call seasonal rot.
And it's extra jarring too because this was the largest gap that we had between seasons because of the aforementioned pandemic.
Yeah.
So we had, high expectations to like hit the ground running. I was especially excited to hear that there was a time skip, and I was like, oh boy, time to see how they've progressed. And we kind of just didn't see much of that outside of visuals,
So,
really.
I think the key word for this review is going to be incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a word to describe this season, season 4, it is incomplete, which is a shame. I'm listening to our first episode. We talked about the we talked about what were the strengths of seasons 1 through 3, and I kept calling it structurally sound. That it was clearly well designed, and all the characters' arcs seemed to contribute to each other and work together toward the finale in a way that felt natural.
Yeah.
And realistic enough to be like, oh yeah, I believe that these are decisions that real characters and real people would make. So no part of it felt contrived, like, oh, the writers are just doing whatever they want to. They were, anyway. So.
Yeah, it never felt like they were stalling with like 1 through 3. Like there were slow points, there were like dips sometimes, maybe like a joke that was slightly too long, but it never felt like someone was just like held hostage and told to make this episode just go so slowly in terms of plot progression.
So the key phrase for seasons 1 through 3 is structurally sound.
Yeah.
It was clearly that they wrote those 3 seasons all to work together and contribute toward each other, so that, you know, all of season 1 builds to season 2, builds to season 3. No, there is very little fat. I mean, we can complain about the, you know, the kind of awkward timing of the jokes all we want, but the point is that, you know, the story itself is always building towards something, and you can tell that something is coming, and that it creates this sense of drama, and like, oh man, where's Avaros? The caterpillar's getting bigger, but no one's addressed it, you know. So very structurally sound. That's how we describe it. This season is incomplete. That's just the only way to describe it. When you look between this season and the seasons before, it is missing pieces, which is bizarre considering that with COVID, they should have had more time than ever to write and pre-produce.
To hammer it out and streamline it, yeah.
And so we heard from the news that as early as 2020, they were still working on the script.
Yeah.
Or 2021, last year. The script was still not complete. We should find that article and link it or something, but
if possible.
But that is alarming to think that they had so much time. And I would like to believe that Aaron E. Haas and Justin Richmond had some script that they were working on, even when we were all shut down in the pandemic. But the idea that the script had not been finalized as recently as last year, as 2021, and that is just crazy to think about because of all the moving pieces in an animation production, that if the script was still being finalized in December 2021, if I have that right, that means no one else
ties up everything else, right?
Yeah, no one else could make progress on anything else. The actors can't do anything, the storyboard artists and the cleanup artists can't do anything.
Yeah.
So that tells me that something went really, really wrong, you know, in the pre-production. And I'll summarize my thoughts on that later. But incomplete is the word.
So we made it through all 9 episodes, and what we ended on felt like a mid-season climax, if even. It was nothing even that dramatic. The stakes didn't actually feel that high, and it feels like there's so much fat in there. From where do we even start?
Yeah.
It's obviously the pacing got worse. We need to talk about how much time was dedicated to just jokes instead of plot.
I think a good place to start would be, let's talk about what we can actually remember from this season. I remember you and I watched the first episode.
Right.
And notably, the first thing I said when the first episode was done, I said, well, we gotta watch episode 2 because that didn't even feel like a whole first episode. It felt like it dropped off in the middle.
Yeah, okay, it's coming back to me now. Obviously, spoilers, you probably shouldn't even be listening to this if you haven't already seen season 4. But yeah, episode 1 was the one that was full of the gag with the Crow Lord, or the Crow Master, who's now associate Crow Lord.
A luxuriously long comedic bit where the Crow Lord character gets to have the most unfunny dialogue in the whole show. It seems to be there expressly for the purpose of taunting the audience, because I miss these characters.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I can't wait to see Callum and Ezrin, and I can't wait to see Opeli again. How's the kingdom doing? I want to see Bait. I think that the Crow Lord joke comes before we even see Ezrin.
It does, I believe.
So Callum is going through the palace, and he's going towards a meeting, and he sees the Crow Lord, which is basically the mailman.
Right.
He's a mailman. And he has a whole bit about, did you get my package yet? And he's like, well, I got promoted to associate Crow Lord, so I don't usually deal with packages anymore.
I'm really curious who was laughing their ass off just like writing that joke.
Someone in the room thought that was the peak of comedy. I will bet money that they just wanted to give a reason. They wanted to give the Crow Lord a joke because someone is friends with the voice actor for the Crow Lord, and was like, hey, I've got a scene coming up in the next season, right? And he's like, you sure do, buddy. I wrote it in just for you. And that was first episode was the only place they could think to put it, because they were like, it would feel unnatural if Callum went to go talk to the Crow Lord after Rayla comes back.
Conceptually, I don't even think the joke was like unfunny. It's just the delivery and how long it lasted. If they just like kept it like real quick, or the Crow Lord or Associate Crow Lord didn't make a big deal out of it, I think I probably would have like chuckled.
It would have been funnier if like Callum was like running and was like running past the Crow Lord, and he was like, hey, Crow Lord, and he was like running. It's like, it's actually Associate Crow Lord now, or something. And but like in and out, like 15 seconds. We don't need to be standing there for a minute looking at this guy. And again, it gets so much worse with this awkward timing where the characters just stand around looking at each other and talking to each other so slowly.
Waiting for the joke to be over.
So slowly, it feels like the writers are imagining a laugh track playing. Like, the characters are gonna stand there and look at each other awkwardly. It's like it feels like a laugh track should play, but it doesn't, so it just feels like really awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought is that it felt a little like the writers were taunting us. They were like, oh, I bet the audience wants to see Ezrin. They want to see what Ezrin looks like now that he's not a baby anymore. It's been 2 years. What does Ezrin look like? Let's put a really long joke right before this scene to just really stretch it out.
It did feel like the writers were treating me like a horse and just like putting a carrot on a stick that somehow keeps extending away from me.
And there are lots and lots and lots of points in the season as a whole that feel like that, where we, the audience, have been given a carrot on a stick to look at, and the writers are just like, just a little bit further, we're gonna have this really awkward exchange first. It's gonna be really not funny. But it's like, no, I want to get to that thing you promised. That's what a lot of jokes in this season feel like. And so let's get into what actually happens. It's not, and so Viren is resurrected in episode 1. In episode 2, Viren and Claudia and Terry climb a mountain, and Claudia tries to steal his staff from a stash, the dragon's hoard, I guess.
Right, they climb the storm spire.
They climb the storm spire, and
Takes a full episode, by the way.
And she looks for the staff, and then she gets into a fight with the elf mage, the wind mage guy up there, and then Terry kills him, and then No, wait, that's episode 3.
I think it is episode 3.
You're right. He's not dead until episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then the end of episode 3 is where we get some kind of stark warning from his last breath message. He's like...
Conceptually kind of cool, but... Yeah.
It is an interesting concept. It takes us 2 episodes to get something that should have happened at the end of episode 1.
Mm-hmm. I really want to get back to that mountain thing, because Yeah, they spent a full episode climbing the mountain. Viren was having a hard time with it, likely due to the fact that he was traumatized from plummeting off on the at the end of the previous season. And somehow, instead of there being some sort of flashback or like something thoughtful to like explore what Viren's feeling, we just get jokes with Terry. Terry, the new character who is now Claudia's elf boyfriend.
Yeah, the pacing is so anemic in this show.
On life support watching the Dragon Prince season 4.
This show is on life support with how the pacing of the jokes being so slow that we could have had Viren climbing the mountain in episode 1. Could have, but they decided to have all of the jokes with Callum in the castle, Soren doing the floss dance.
Oh, I purged that from my memory. Yes,
The
there was.
Baker getting his own Game of Thrones reference. The Baker is not a funny character. I'm convinced some higher up, some producer is voicing him or something. I mean,
Well,
I can't.
the
I'm not
Baker
gonna
is
verify
just Viren's voice actor recasted, which also kind of, honestly, maybe this is a nitpick. It kind of annoys me that the Baker gets so many lines when his voice is completely identifiable as Viren's voice actor as well.
that. Okay. All right. I was gonna say like the Baker makes no sense as a character. He's just not funny. But it seems like, so we talked about seasonal rot being kind of a modern problem,
Right.
with writers and producers especially being able to get so much feedback and so much emphasis from, the fan presence. It creates this feedback loop of, they think, oh, we're producing gold. Look at all these fans who love us so much. We're making gold.
We checked the keywords on Twitter. The Baker has been mentioned at least 30 times.
They love him. Oh my god, he's a meme. He's a meme. So it's creating this kind of bubble where modern show writers and producers they're given this inflated sense that they're creating gold and that they can do no wrong.
That's certainly what it feels like.
And it feels like the first 3 seasons must have been written all at once.
I probably would agree with that.
Yeah, so like Aaron E. Haas and Justin Richmond set out a plan for the first 3 seasons. They wrote it all at once before they had a fan base. Then, when they were like, okay, let's write the next couple seasons, then they had a fan base. Then they could go on Twitter and see people, making GIF sets of Soren and Viren and the Baker, and they're like, I would die for him. And they're like, wow, people really love the Baker. Let's give him more jokes. Let's give the Baker more screen time so that people can have more footage of him to make more GIF sets and retweet it a lot. That's what we need to do. So seasonal rot being a modern problem, kind of created and reinforced by social media, that writers and producers are able to be insulated. They're not being exposed to harsh criticisms. It's like they can wrap themselves in the bubble of their fan base. It creates this feeling that they can right no wrong, so they're just gonna write all the dumb jokes that they want. I thought jelly tarts were just gonna be like kind of a joke for the first season.
While Ezrin was a kid.
Yeah,
who has nothing else to do.
Because it's kind of to represent, symbolically. We're gonna get specific.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a symbolism for his childish whimsy. He's stealing jelly tarts in the first scene.
Yeah, this royalty, this actual prince, is stealing from the Baker.
Yeah, it doesn't characterize him that well, but it's cute and it's a symbol for look, he's innocent and pure, and then that would be. But now it's like every other word out of Ezrin's mouth seems to be about jelly tarts. I don't even think the writers realize that they have completely neglected to give Ezrin a personality that is not jelly tarts.
Jelly tarts isn't a personality? I need to rethink my life right now.
He's and they're like, I wonder if this is almost some kind of some prejudice or bias on the writer's part, that they're like, I have kids, kids really do be this stupid. But that doesn't make for a compelling character to watch on screen over and over again. Anyway, where was I going with that?
We were talking about moments that we actually do remember from the
Right.
season. And I'm kind of drawing a blank when I try to think about the mid episodes of the season.
Right. So, seasonal rot is the word we're going to use to describe how this feels. It feels like the writers were encouraged to just write anything. This season feels like a first draft. It feels like they got wrapped up in the fan base telling them that they were perfect, that they love the baker, that they want to see more jokes about jelly tarts, and they just went with it. So it feels empty.
Yeah, I just don't understand how you just write a whole 9 episodes and then end, and it just feels like that's only half the season.
So, in season 1, we're gonna go back. We're gonna make a comparison.
Sure.
There's it's not the end of the story, obviously, because it's just the first piece of the arcs that they had planned to return the Dragon Prince to Zadia. But in the first season, there is a story that is complete. The human princes meet an elf girl, and they decide to work together to return the egg.
To end racism.
Yes, there's going to be a war, and they're going to prevent the war by returning the egg. Of course, they don't do that at the end of season 1, but they get the egg to like a safe midpoint, and they meet a witch that helps them prevent the egg from dying, and they hatch Zim.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good endpoint. But that is a successful arc. By the midpoint of the egg, like the whole the goal of season 1 is just protect the egg. And the egg is gonna die because they dropped it in some cold water, so they gotta save the egg, and they work together to find a witch, and she tells them, we have to hatch the egg, but it can only be hatched in a storm. And then he's like, I'm gonna smash this crystal orb that has a storm in it. And then they succeed.
Mm-hmm.
They succeed in what they set out to do. It's by episode 2, they set out on their quest. We're gonna save the egg, and they do end up saving it, and it hatches and it turns into the little baby dragon.
So like the first part, we have protect the egg hatches at the end. Number 2, we have reach Zadia. They reach Zadia. 3,
Right.
Get dragon to mom. They accomplished that. Season 4, what were they trying to do? Find Erebos?
Right.
They didn't accomplish that even.
Right. So
They
each
didn't even
season,
have a goal that they reached at the end of that season.
as the only discernible goal that they had for this season was, let's go talk to the Earth Dragon King to get the map that he has that leads to Erebos. And we don't even know if they achieved their goal, because the last we saw, Erebos has a map that's etched onto his tooth, and
Rex Igneous.
Rex Igneous has the map to Erebos etched on his tooth, but he didn't give them the tooth. They just left.
Yeah, he got mad at them and kicked them out.
He got mad, kicked them out, and they left.
We need to come
without
back
it.
to that later. I'm gonna make a note for that.
Right. So this season has ended in a way that makes us feel our characters didn't even accomplish anything. That they set out to talk to the dragon who has the map to Erebos, and we don't even know if they got it. They could have just... It would have taken one extra shot at the end of the last episode where Rayla is like, or like Callum could be like, ugh, we didn't get the map, you guys. And then Rayla could be like, actually. And then she pulls out the dragon's tooth and she like stole it off camera.
His whole tooth, that.
Yeah, or maybe it got knocked out of his mouth and she picked it up and ran with it. It would have just taken one shot, just one scene, and then like, oh hey, we got the map. And that fixes this problem. Then I would feel like, oh, they did something. They achieved their goal. But I have no proof that they achieved their goal, so I feel like this whole season that I watched was pointless. I feel like I wasted my time because I watched characters go on a quest and then they didn't even achieve it. They didn't achieve shit. It was so nice in season 1 to see the characters work together to save the egg, and by the end, they have saved the egg, and it turned into the little dragon. I knew that they still had more to do. I knew that that wasn't the end of the journey, but I knew that they achieved something. So I felt validated in all of the time and investment that I had put into the story, because I was like, look at them. They're growing and working together and making little steps toward their goal. It seems so bizarre that this is missing from this season, because you look at the first 3 seasons and they've all got this fundamental structure to them, that the characters always set out with a goal in mind, and by the end of each season they've achieved something, if not exactly the goal that they set out for,
something significant,
right? And it makes you feel good to watch them get something done.
It's like, yeah, they reached the checkpoint.
So my question is, how the hell did these same guys, the same guys who wrote the first 3 seasons, end up with this? That they were like, we're gonna have our characters go look for the Rex Igneus, but in the end, they're not even gonna get the map that they were looking for. They're just gonna get chased out of a cave, and the dragons will yell at each other, and it'll look cool, maybe. And that's it.
And you mentioned how there was it felt like something was missing. That describes the entire season, really. So
right.
If we go back to the beginning, Claudia comes in, and unlike the previous season where she said that the bug spun a chrysalis 2 days ago, this time at the start of season 4, she added that it has been 2 years since Viren has been, well, alive. And we just kind of skip right past that. Claudia mentions that she had to do things that she could never imagine that she'd have to do or even could do. And we hear about none of it. We see none of it. She doesn't mention anything about it again. Also, she has a boyfriend now. And we see none of that. We hear about none of that. That's so frustrating.
Right. So I think, and the word I used earlier is incomplete, and this is gonna drive me insane, I can tell. But what feels obvious to me is that the writers had something in mind that they were forced to cut. If not pressured by producers or the gods that be at Netflix. They were forced to cut something, and it feels so obvious.
I'm telling you, it feels like someone was held hostage over the production and forced to make it like this.
So the way we end in season 9, the way that we said, well, they
Episode 9?
Yeah, episode 9.
Right, got it.
Season 9. The way we ended episode 9, where the build-up was to this confrontation with Rex Igneus, this earth dragon, and then the 2 dragons yell at each other, and then they all go their separate ways. But we don't even know if they got the thing that they were looking for. It all feels like a midpoint, because the characters haven't even achieved anything yet.
Yeah, half a season, midpoint.
It feels like a midpoint. It feels like the next episode is going to be like, oh, we didn't get the map. I guess we have to chase Claudia and Viren to get the map. Or they're going to talk to, what's her name? Zubeia. They're going to talk to the Queen Dragon and say, we couldn't get the map. And she's going to say, well, now you have no choice but to go find another dragon who has
You gotta see the sea dragon now.
Yeah, you have to talk to the other dragon who has a different piece of the puzzle. And then they would go off to do that, and that would be like, give the characters something to achieve so that by the end of the season it could feel like they'd done something. But we don't get that, so that makes me feel distinctly like they had a larger plan for this season, but they were forced to cut something, and then a producer said, no, cut this, make this the finale, and drag it to the end. And so maybe this Earth King, this Earth Dragon confrontation was supposed to be episode 6, maybe? And they said, wait, you want us to take episode 6 and turn it into episode 9? how are we supposed to fill all that time? That's 60 minutes of time we have to fill for all the other episodes if we stretch it out.
Just put in a TikTok joke.
They were like, oh, just pad it with jokes where the characters, give really, really unfunny dialogue and then just look at each other back and forth and make awkward noises. And that's what they did. That's what it feels like. It feels like they were forced to take the midpoint of their season and stretch it to be the finale of the season and then just have lots of awkward dialogue in between.
I just want to jump back to Terry for a second. Where did this lad come from? I need to know what's the story behind that. So, I know that they have been producing graphic novels to sort of fill in information that they're not covering, like over the time skip, there's actually at least 2 books, I believe, that are out at this point involving why Rayla left over the time skip. So I wonder if some of the missing content we're seeing in season 4 would be because they're saving it. Like, I don't know if that's what's happening, but with how dry the season feels, that's what I have to think almost.
It's disappointing that they would decide to leave so much of Callum and Rayla's characters in the book. It seems like it's a push to drive the sales of the book, that in terms of missing parts, that seasons 1, 2, and 3 are also structurally sound, not just having a narrative endpoint that feels substantial enough to justify the rest of the episodes, where it feels like the characters accomplish something, but that the characters each experience growth of some kind. If not all of them, at least the main few usually experience a growth of some kind, to be like, Callum and Rayla are strangers in the first season, and by the end we feel like they are trusting each other now. And that's like the climax in the finale, is that Rayla is keeping this secret from Callum, that she doesn't want to tell him that his dad is dead, and he can tell that she's keeping secrets, so he doesn't trust her fully.
Yeah.
And it's because that they don't trust each other that they drop the egg, and it hits the freezing water. But their relationship changes, and so they are growing as characters, learning to trust each other. That's season 1. We start as enemies and strangers, and then we're gonna start trusting each other by the end. And then season 2 is them slowly but surely becoming friends and learning to rely on each other more. And then season 3 is the romantic arc where they, get some alone time away from Ezran and their feelings start to develop. So it's very clearly and intentionally designed for the characters to experience growth. This season is missing that also.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, obviously, the decision, whoever's choice it was, to leave Callum and Rayla's story unfinished, to just leave it in the books, to drive sales of the books, is damaging. It's damaging to the characters, because what I know is that the writers are like, well, let's not address why Rayla left Callum. Let's not address it. We should not address it because we want people to go out and buy the books.
Mm-hmm.
But what I am seeing in the show, in the content of the show, is that Rayla is a huge bitch who has been absolutely dismantled by the writers. They have stopped treating her like a character, and they've started using her as just a product, just to prop up the books.
Season 4 Rayla doesn't feel real, even.
She doesn't feel like a character. She's definitely not the same character from the first 3 seasons.
Nuh-uh.
She is a massive bitch who, when she first sees Callum again... No. Yeah, I'm not being harsh.
No, continue.
She comes home to the person she allegedly loves most in the world,
mm-hmm.
and she knows that she hurt him, and, she probably had a reason for it, but she can't even say sorry. In the first scene that she has back with Callum, And he's just like, I'm going to bed. And she's like, no, wait, can you stay? And I just won't say anything.
It's been 2 years. I missed you, babe.
She lost every ounce of emotional intelligence and personality that she had as a character because the writers don't want her to say anything about, they don't want to spoil the books. We can't have her say what was in the books, otherwise people wouldn't buy the books.
The best way I can describe it is that it feels like Rayla is no longer a main character, but like a secondary or tertiary character.
She's just there to prop up sales. She's there to prop up sales of the books. I wonder if they even wanted her to be in this season. But they felt like they had no choice. So she comes off as a massive bitch because the writers are leaving her character in the books. If you want Rayla's character, if you want to understand this scene, then you need to go read the books. So all of their scenes subsequently, Rayla and Callum are awkward with each other because they are refusing to discuss the events of the books.
That's the writers holding them apart, placing their relationship in limbo. Let me tell you, that is so frustrating to watch.
It's really uncomfortable to watch. I'm watching these two characters who I already saw them grow and develop as people and slowly gain feelings for each other.
And
I thought it happened a little too quick in season 3, but I already saw them grow and turn into, mature and loving people who wanted to have a relationship. And now I'm watching them be dismantled. The writers are like, oh, no. They're not emotionally mature. They don't really know how to talk about this, so we're not gonna let them talk about it. I feel like they were doing so good talking to each other, and Rayla was always like, you can talk to me, Callum. I'm here.
And vice versa, too.
And Callum was like, I want to help you. I think you're amazing. They were doing so good at talking to each other until this season. And it's like, oh, Rayla hurt Callum's feelings. Of course he doesn't feel like he can trust her anymore. They have to rebuild that trust slowly.
And then suddenly he just asks her to kill him.
It drives me insane when little teenagers on the internet use, real people logic to try and explain away the flaws in character writing. They're like, oh, Rayla just, she needs to work up the courage to apologize, and Callum, he feels hurt, he doesn't know if he can trust her, so of course their dialogue's gonna be awkward. Like, no. Don't treat these characters like real people who deserve forgiveness and sympathy. They are being puppeted by writers who are holding, they're holding them hostage. The writers are making them do these dumb things. So you show me these characters who are capable of all this emotional dialogue in seasons 1, 2, and 3, or they can talk to each other and admit all these things, and like, I'm scared, or I love you, and I'm always here to help.
Or I don't want you to see me being pathetic and sad.
Yeah, they say all kinds of things to each other, and then you bring me the same characters just, 2 years later in a new season, and suddenly they can't talk anymore. They have no idea how to have a heart-to-heart. They're just like, oh, I don't want to say anything.
I need to go to bed, Rayla. I have a gag order from the writers.
Exactly. And so it feels like they've been neutered. That the writers are now hamstringing the characters. So they're just ripping out their emotional intelligence to keep the drama going. All I needed was just a scene where Callum and Rayla reunite the beginning of episode 2, and he could just say, how could you leave me like that? It was really traumatizing that you left so abruptly. And she just needs to say, I'm sorry, I felt like I had no other way. It was to protect you because I didn't want you to be in danger if XYZ blah blah blah. I don't know, I haven't read the books. They just needed to say, just anything. It didn't have to be long. Didn't need to be a long conversation. But these characters know how to express themselves. We had 3 seasons showing that these characters know how to express themselves. They know how to have an emotional conversation, and the writers are refusing to let them do it, so they feel like puppets.
I especially think it's irresponsible to just offload that all to the books, because your show started as an animated series. So
it's scummy, yeah.
Even if you're hoping to expand the story through the books, through other mediums, you probably shouldn't leave the people that joined in for the animated series, that will continue the animated series, just high and dry.
It is damaging the work because it's not a franchise. I mean, sure, it's a franchise. It's in terms of that they've branched out, but an animated work is not judged by its franchise materials.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Potter is not judged by its subsequent spin-off works.
Yeah, it's like finish the story first, and
Yeah.
then you could add stuff on. Come on, guys.
Yeah, it's insane that they think this is justified. So, in a way, of course, this season is not structurally sound narratively, because we've already established that what happens is really poorly paced. It's just that in episode 1 of season 1, we learn that there's an assassination attempt on the king.
Mm-hmm.
That's compelling
And
stuff.
yeah, it's already in motion too.
It's already in motion. And the quest for episode 1 is, how do we save the king? We gotta save the king. How do we keep him from being assassinated?
How do we keep the princes safe? We'll send them off.
Yeah. So you feel like the story is moving, even though you just met these characters. You don't know much about the world or anything, but you know something's happening.
Yeah.
Episode 1 is Callum has a birthday party, and
I forgot about the birthday party actually.
And
Oh
everyone,
my god, they wasted so much time trying to keep that a surprise from him. That's not plot.
the pacing of episode 1 is glacially slow. It's so slow, and it all builds up to, oh, we were having a birthday party for you, and they're like, oh, it'll be cute, it'll be a parody of episode 1, and that this is not dramatic, and that it's not entertaining.
It's like an episode 0 that they sometimes do in anime and stuff.
It's like an OVA. Anyway, so what we have is like the opposite of a narratively sound story for season 4, in that, so what should have been the inciting incident for season 4 is...
Should be Claudia getting the staff and killing what's-his-face.
Yes, it should have been Claudia's fight with what's-his-face.
I don't even remember his name.
We don't remember his name.
Rest in peace, my guy.
But it takes them 3 episodes for them to climb the mountain and for Claudia to have her fight with the mage, kill him, and then he gives out his dire warning where he says Averos is coming back, or the fallen star has returned. That should have been the inciting incident. That should have been episode 1. Then we could feel like, oh, danger! Things are coming.
It would have felt so good if that was episode 1 instead of the end of 3.
Instead, it takes 3 episodes for us to feel like something that has actually happened. And in all that time, we were enduring just the worst jokes. Just inane and really annoying jokes.
The thing that makes me so mad about all the slow jokes that don't add the plot and are too drawn out in the first place is that we made it all the way to the point where Soren reunited with Claudia. He talked at her a little bit. She said some vague stuff. And then Viren shows up, who Soren thought was dead. And moving forward, we didn't even get a scene where Soren talked to Viren. They just gagged him with a plant. And then he just didn't get to say anything to them at all throughout the last 3 episodes.
It's because we had to focus on the drama of Janai trying to be a queen over her camp of displaced Sunfire Elf people. That was what we had to focus and spend all of our time on.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea why we've given so much screen time, to the Sunfire Elves.
I'll tell you what, that's what should have been its own book.
It seems like, and especially because the Sunfire Elf conflict, where there's tension between the humans and the Sunfire Elves, and Janai's brother Kareem wants to usurp her.
Yeah.
That is the narrative, the piece of the narrative that is actually the most complete. It is the most complete in that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Mm-hmm.
Janai is kind of a reluctant queen at the beginning. She's kind of unsure what to do with her power and authority. And then there's a conflict that she has to resolve between the humans and the elves. And she's being told she shouldn't marry her wife.
Don't make it a symbol, he said.
Yeah, and there's, so there's drama and politics and lots of exposition dumps where they explain lore about the people and their culture. and then at the end she has to fight her brother for the throne. That is complete. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it adds nothing
Yeah, it's
to
not
the story at all.
it's not a high priority B plot, but ironically it's the only part of the season that started and concluded in
It's
any form.
right. It's the only character. So Janai and General Amaya are the only characters that actually accomplish something this season, and it's not even that much. Janai went from I'm kind of reluctant to be queen to I guess I really do want to be queen, and I'm still queen actually, and my brother wants to fight for the throne, but I'll kick his ass, and I'm still queen. There wasn't even any change in the status quo. Nothing changed in the world or the story at large. It was just a character growth arc.
The only change was Kareem's staff breaking.
Yeah. So it changed nothing in the story at large. It didn't change the status quo. It would have been more interesting if Kareem had actually succeeded in deposing his sister, and then Janai and Amaya would have been forced to go on the run, and that would change the balance of power between the humans and the elves, and then there could be a new conflict brewing, because maybe Kareem's pro-war, and maybe he wants to restart the war with the humans to assert his power and right to the throne. That would have been more interesting, and then it would have had world implications. It would have had an effect on the world at large, and then we could feel like, oh, that was important. Something actually changed. But no, Janai just reasserts her right to the throne, so she's exactly in the place that she always was. She's still queen. She was queen in episode 1, she's still queen in episode 9. Nothing changed. But her arc is actually complete as a character.
It's one of those plots where the writing does not serve to really assist the overarching narrative. It's just there to reinforce themes that would be good for the youth watching.
Right. So the main characters have become side characters in their own show.
Yeah, they're watered down versions of themselves. Callum seems to forget that he could use magic all the time this season.
Yeah, he suddenly drops his staff in episode 9, and suddenly he can't do magic anymore, and so they're like, oh no, I can't do magic without my staff.
Bro, in season 2 you were casting Aspero with your fingers.
Yeah,
do something.
We had a whole arc where he learned how to do
Don't
that.
just stand there looking stupid.
So character arcs are missing, is the point. Callum and Rayla start the show being awkward because they don't trust each other anymore. And by episode 9, they are still awkward.
They don't trust each other. They're not allowed to talk about it. They can't make any headway as characters, really.
Right, and nothing really changed. They don't have an emotional heart-to-heart. They don't address anything. They are slowly becoming less awkward. They get a little less awkward by season 9, but there's no growth. They're not allowed to grow for some reason.
Episode 9. But we all know what you meant.
Oh, I said season.
Yeah, season 9 again. It's
Damn.
fine.
See, the seasonal rot is infecting my brain.
It's rotting your brain too. We gotta get you out of here.
I keep thinking that this season was 5 seasons long for how long it felt. So
all that should have been like 6 episodes most.
So here's what happened. Aaron Ehasz and Justin Richmond were working on the script. They were pitching multiple storylines. They were like, let's have some conflict with the Sunfire Elves. Let's have conflict with over here with the humans, and let's have a conflict that takes place in flashbacks, because the characters have been separated for 2 years, and there were a lot of interesting things that happened in those 2 years. And Claudia is going to reference that. She said, "Oh, I had to do a lot of things. I had to do lots of terrible things in those 2 years while you were dead, Dad." So in the trailer, they are hinting that there were lots of things that happened over those last 2 years.
Wink.
I would bet physical money that the reason this season feels so empty is because there's a whole plot missing from it. I will bet that the reason the characters don't have much to do, like Callum and Rayla and Ezrin and the dragon, all that they have to do is like meander through the forest to find the earth dragon, and then they go through some caves. that's not compelling plot relevant stuff. They're not making big decisions. They're just going on a walking tour. I will bet you physical money that what Aaron Ehasz and Justin Richmond wanted to do was that the main characters would be giving each other stories and having flashbacks about how they spent their time the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
We could have gotten a flashback episode where Rayla describes how she failed to find Viren and how she was looking for him but couldn't find him, and she was like going to different elf communities but she couldn't get anyone to talk to her because she's banished. And so we could have heard her talk about that. And Claudia could have had an episode where she talked to her father and told him about all the things she had to do while they were, fugitives in Zadia.
I still think the perfect place for that would have been when they were climbing up the mountain. She could have told him the stories to distract him from his fear of climbing up the mountain.
Right. And it feels so obvious. It feels so obvious that we get here in episode 1 and we're like, wow, so much has changed. So much has changed. I want to know how all these characters changed. How did Callum learn all the new spells he learned? How did Rayla meet her little monkey friend? She just has a little monkey pal now?
Yeah, she's got a monkey pal that makes portals. But that's for the comics, I assume.
And we have no idea why. And Claudia has an elf boyfriend. That's interesting. I want to know how all these things happened. And so then episode 2 features Claudia, Viren, and Terry taking the longest climb up a mountain.
It makes you feel like you're climbing it with them in real time.
It's just the longest climb up a mountain, and Viren is starting to have panic attacks because he was killed by falling off this mountain. And so instead of saying, "Hey Dad, I know, I'll distract you by telling you a story. I'll tell you how I met Terry. I'll tell you about how it was really hard for me when you were dead, and I had to survive here on my own. And then I had to do really tough things. But then I met Terry, and he made me laugh, and he really reconnected with me and made me not feel so lonely. I'll tell you about that." That makes sense. Viren is like having a moment of weakness. This is a perfect time for Claudia to give us, the audience, a little peek at what happened. And how, because that whole episode I was just looking at Terry and I was thinking, why are you here? How did you get here?
Why are you still talking?
Why is an elf okay with dark magic?
That is such a big gaping hole.
It's a gaping plot hole
in the story.
By episode 2, I'm thinking I want the answers to these questions. I want to see, and so I bet the writers were thinking, we will fill the time with the main characters by having them give flashback stories, and we'll fill the time. And I would have loved to see a flashback where Claudia meets Terry and we could have learned, where he's from. But I will bet money that some producer, some higher up said, no, you can't do that. You cannot have these flashbacks. You have to take them out. And then they were like, oh shit, that's like 30% of the runtime.
That was supposed to be the season.
We went down from 9 episodes to 6. I bet they had 3 episodes that were going to be flashbacks. One for Rayla, one for Claudia, and maybe one for Callum and Ezran. I bet they had 3 episodes worth of flashbacks. They were told to cut those episodes and just stretch it out to 9.
And I think the other seasons did have like a few flashbacks per season where they would integrate it into whatever was happening in the current plot. Mm-hmm. Like Viren recounting to the child queen.
Exactly. They've already done this before, where they would have flashbacks that add context to the drama that's unfolding in that episode. They've already done this, and the fact that it's not in this season is a gaping hole.
It's kind of sus, honestly. I really want to know, like, I'm just more curious than anything, what went wrong? How did this happen? I need someone to tell me.
I want to know what producer, slammed the brakes on this and said, no, you can't have the flashbacks because XYZ, money, sales, we have to sell the books, something, blah, blah, blah. And it detracts from the story in so many obvious ways. The fact that Viren meets Claudia's elf boyfriend and asks no questions.
No questions asked, just scowls.
He's not curious. Viren is supposed to be racist. He hates elves and he wants to go to war with Zadia. You're telling me he has no questions for Claudia and that it makes him come off as a dumbass? Did he lose his brain cells in the fall?
She didn't
Maybe.
get some of his brain back.
So, that it feels like a gaping plot hole. Like, what happened to Viren? Is he a zombie? Is he actually losing brain cells? That he has no questions about Terry? That's obvious. Part 2, that thing you pointed out a second ago about how...
Child Queen?
No. What?
What, the Child Queen?
No.
Part 2?
When did you bring that up?
The Child Queen was in reference to them using flashbacks to go concurrent with the current plot. So Viren talking about the flashback to fighting the dragon, or
when he
the
was talking
flashback
to the little girl queen.
Right.
No. The thing that you mentioned a little while ago about how you were disappointed when Soren saw his father for the first time in 2 years, he thought he was dead, and he just screams, "No! No! No!"
What a scream that was.
Here's what's missing. From that episode, or maybe the episode after it, there was supposed to be a scene where Soren and Viren talk. And Soren should have said, "But Dad, I thought you were dead. How are you alive?" And Viren could be like, "That's the something dark magic, my boy. You never. I'm not going to give up that easy. Blah blah blah. I would do anything for your sister, and I'm here because she's a good daughter, and she wants to support me and not have me be killed. Unlike you tried to stab me." Because that was in the finale of season 3, where Soren found the courage to stab his own father.
What he thought was his father.
When it was an illusion.
Yeah.
But his own father was like threatening to kill Ezran, and so he stabbed it, but it turned out to be an illusion. That is a ripe conflict. That is drama that we've been waiting on that Viren and Soren finally see each other again, and they don't even speak.
Can we just skip over it?
They don't get anything to say.
We'll come back to it later, or maybe it'll be in a book.
They wrap up Soren in vines and gag him so that they can't talk. They have him do a joke with his stinky feet immediately after.
Yes.
Here's what's missing.
They did.
I bet that they wanted to add context for that scene in a flashback. I bet they wanted to have a flashback of Soren maybe, interacting with his father. It could inform his trauma and his fear of Viren. And then they wrote that scene of him talking to Viren. They wrote that confrontation, but they wrote it with the context of the flashback. And he was going to reference like, "Oh, Dad, you never supported me when I was a kid, and in the flashback, of course I turned against you. You were a terrible father, like I referenced in the flashback." But because they ripped out that flashback, they were like, "Oh shit, we can't have this confrontation now, because if we take out the flashback, the audience won't know what Soren's talking about if he references the flashback." So instead of rewriting the scene, they just ripped it out. And what that says to me is that they had a version of this script. Some producer said, "No, you have to cut out these pieces." And then it was a mad dash to rewrite this script in like 2 weeks. They had to stretch it out, and they had to cut whatever corners they had. They were like, "Okay, we could rewrite this scene with Viren and Soren with no context from the flashbacks that have now been cut. But it's 4 a.m. and I'm tired. I've been writing nonstop for 10 days.
Yeah, I was gonna say like.
So we're just gonna cut that scene and put a plant sock in Viren's mouth, and they're just not gonna speak." That's what this season feels like. All of it feels like there are giant pieces missing where the characters should be talking and should be interacting with each other and sharing stories. They just don't, because someone is gagging the writers.
It's a conspiracy. It's a writing conspiracy. It's especially sad because these writers have already proven themselves to be competent. So
Right.
it's just especially weird to come back to this.
That is my only. I won't be convinced otherwise.
Yeah.
You cannot convince me that Aaron Ehasz and Justin Richmond made this show without guns held to their heads.
And then we didn't even get a great climax. Like, the last thing, or one of the last things we saw, Rex Igneous was pissed because Claudia came in and he was like, traitors, all of you. Zubeia comes in as Rex was gonna kill them. They do a dragon off. He flexes. She flexes. What I expected was for Rex to calm down and then Zubeia to maybe explain the situation so they can get the map, which we talked about earlier. They didn't even accomplish getting the map unless somehow they secretly did. Maybe we'll see that in the next season or something.
See, the tension there between so the crew, the main characters go to talk to Rex Igneous, and the whole tension in that scene is that Rex Igneous did not like the Dragon King Ozymandias, who he thinks is still alive because he's been in his lair in the cave
for the past 80
for
years,
80 years. He doesn't know that Ozymandias is dead. And then he realizes that the Dragon Prince is there in the group, and he's like, you deceived me, and I hate you now, and I'm going to eat you.
You sent your own son, you didn't want to face me, coward? That kind of thing.
Right, so he's pissed, and he's been in a cave for 80 years. He doesn't know anything, but it's implied that he said, I was rivals with Ozymandias, and he says, Zubeia sent you? He says it like, he knows her, or they had a relationship or a friendship. I think the subtext there is that Rex Igneous was in love with Zubeia and wanted to be the Dragon King, but she chose Ozymandias over him. I think that's the subtext there.
Azandium or something like that. Ozymandias is Zim.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, did I get his name wrong?
Honestly, they're so close, it's hard. It's fine. It's fine.
Avizandum.
Or you could just say
It's
thunder.
Avizandum.
Avizandum.
Yeah, it's Avizandum.
Yeah.
All right, Ozymandias is Zim.
Right.
Avizandum is the
Stone boy.
the king who has been turned into stone.
King of rocks.
So there's this implication that Rex Igneous had a relationship or a friendship at least with Zubeia, and that there's context there, that they've known each other for hundreds of years. That they were
That's what the
old
subtext
friends.
says.
So Zubeia and Rex Igneous meet in the final scene, and they bark lightning and fire at each other, and then they don't talk.
And then they don't talk, which makes no sense because they've been reinforcing how Erebos is coming back and how it's important that they need to work together to get the drop on him because that's what they had to do before.
To prevent him from being
And then
let
the
out.
writers just have Rex Igneous walk back in. Zubeia doesn't say anything. Zubeia doesn't stop him. She doesn't explain the situation
They
to
could have had a
over
great.
it.
They could have said anything. They could have said, "You look well, Rex Igneous."
Yeah.
And he could have said, "You also look fine, Zubeia.
You can
You haven't aged a day," or something. It could have been simple. It could have been anything.
you could
But
feel the air leaving my brain as I think about this, and I'm just disappointed.
it's because. So the tension in those episodes leading up to the end is that Rex Igneous is out of touch, and he doesn't respect anyone. That they come to see him and they give him gifts, but he's really curt and mean, and he's like, I don't want your gifts, pathetic humans. And then someone that he actually might respect, Zubeia, shows up to save the day and stop him from killing everybody.
And we get nothing despite the excellent setup.
It's
I was prepared.
It's a perfect setup for them to have dialogue, and he could be put in his place like, no, I'm the Dragon Queen, and I know what's going on here, and you need to help these humans so that they can prevent the return of Averos. Or Erebos.
Erebos.
Yeah, it's
R
stupid.
before V.
It's a stupid name.
It's hard,
But-
honestly.
But they have no dialogue at all. Rex Igneous just grunts and goes back into his cave, and what that tells me...
Smashes the door, gets pissed off.
What that tells me is that this script is unfinished. it was unfinished. They were forced to, like, it was 5 a.m. They were like, it's the deadline is 6 a.m. and they were just like, do I write dialogue for this scene? No, he just grunts and turns back into the lair and goes away.
Mm-hmm.
It tells me that they were forced to do massive rewrites on a crunch. They had no time. So it feels sloppy, it feels half-assed, it feels incomplete.
I feel like there's something I'd like to say about Erebos from this season, but we honestly didn't get much.
We didn't see him. He's a non-character. He was a
Not
great
much.
character in the first parts of the show, but here he's a non-character. And that also tells me that there must have been writing cuts, that they were like, they might have had something cool planned for him to say or do,
Mm-hmm.
but it must have ended up on the floor.
Got cut or removed or something.
Yeah, because he doesn't even exist. He's just not even on screen.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel like that's the totality of my feelings for this season. It is incomplete.
That's about how I feel on it.
The story holds no water. Nothing substantial happens. The only thing that does happen doesn't change the status quo of the world, and it's with characters that are off doing something else completely. We can't even say that the conflict with the Sunfire Elves and Janai and Amaya accomplishes anything. It accomplishes actually literally nothing, because nothing about the world changes.
Mm-hmm.
The characters have been hobbled. They're not allowed to have emotional growth anymore because the writers want you to buy the books. And some major plot elements have been completely ripped out. And we talked about the possibility that they were having flashbacks to pad out the story,
Mm-hmm.
just like they did very effectively in seasons 2 and 3. But instead, Terry, the only answer we get about Terry's background is that he came from a village that was transphobic, and
That is what the subtext implies. Or direct text.
all he gets is just some dialogue, unprompted.
Unprompted. It was pretty
completely
unprompted.
Unprompted dialogue, because Viren isn't interested in talking to Terry.
He does not care.
Viren is very aloof. He's not talking to Terry. Terry just talks at him and totally unprompted says, I'm trans. I come from a village where my transness wasn't accepted, and I've elected to, leave my village to live as myself. And that's all we get. I would bet money that Terry had his own flashback.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah. That's how confident I am.
Mm-hmm.
That I would bet money that Terry had his own dedicated flashback that would have illustrated he came from a repressive culture that did not accept him as he was, and then he met Claudia, who was refreshing and perhaps accepted him, and maybe she's like, oh, you're an elf, but we can't be friends because I'm a human and I do dark magic, and she's like, and he could be like, well, my village doesn't accept me either, so I don't really trust them to maybe we can be friends, because my village said that you guys are bad, but I don't believe that because they don't even treat me nice.
Yeah.
And
At this
then-
point, we can really only speculate. But
And then he could say, she could be like, well, I accept you for who you are. I think you're pretty cute. And then he could be like, wow, someone's respecting me and affirming my gender identity. I am now supportive of this girl who does dark magic, even though I'm supposed to hate dark magic. I support her because of this interaction. I bet they wrote a culture of that the Earthblood Elves are like really repressive and conservative, and they were going to make references to imply that the Earthblood Elves are like Trump supporters. They're hillbillies. And some producer was like, no, you have to take this out. It's offensive to rural people. So just reduce Terry's backstory to one line of dialogue. He can be trans, but you can't have a flashback that villainizes, people in the country the way you have it here.
maybe. Well, it's speculation, but Uh, yeah, we'll see what happens in the next season, but at this point, I'm not excited
Yeah.
about watching it. But do you
I,
have any like closing remarks?
closing remarks are that I'm not hopeful for this show anymore.
It really took the wind out of my sails.
It feels like the whole story is meant to be seasons 1 through 3. 1 through 3 is the whole story where it's like a narrative of like humans and elves working together to achieve peace to defeat an evil ambitious wizard, and they succeed. They win the day. They all work together, and that's the story. That's all that was ever supposed to be written. The major stumbling blocks they have here, where the characters have been, completely disfigured to create drama where there really shouldn't be any, tells me that this is not the same story. They are writing from the hip now. It's just whatever they can do to please the producers. That, this story has been clearly just cut all to hell. That I don't believe this is the original version of the story. I believe they had a script that got absolutely butchered, and then they had to stretch it and just cut what they could cut. So my feelings on this season is that it's a new show, and I don't have hope for it. I think they did their good story in The Dragon Prince, the original 1 through 3.
Seasons 1 through 3.
That they did it. It was simple. It was 3 acts, a beginning, height of action, and then a finale. But this is not that. It's not complete. There isn't even a solid act 1. The characters don't even achieve anything in this first season. So I don't have faith. Yeah, this is, I won't call it bad. I would just call it incomplete. It's
incomplete and a regression.
Yeah.
We are not hopeful, but at least we will see what happens at season 5, if it picks up or not, but we are not hopeful.
I would call this a stumble. This is a huge stumble. I could have hope that the writers are strong enough to be like, okay, we had problems in season 4, but we'll fix them. We'll add the things we wanted to add in seasons going forward. So this is a stumble. It's undeniably they've hit something in the road. Something in the production went horribly wrong. They can either recover in season 5 and like learn from their mistakes and start writing the characters in the way that we trust them to be intelligent and talking to each other and start giving us the plot information that we actually want to see, or it can get worse. And we'll just have to see. They can either recover or it can get worse. We'll just see what they do.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Jelly tarts, man.